The house was silent, save for the creaking of the old floorboards beneath my feet. I stood by the window, watching as the first signs of winter began to creep into the streets outside. The trees, now bare of their leaves, swayed gently in the chilly wind, their branches scraping the window panes. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace could not mask the cold that seeped into the very walls of the house. This house, once full of life and laughter, now felt like a tomb, a place where memories of happier times lived in every corner, haunting me. I had lived here for over 30 years. This house had seen me through it all, the births of my children, their first steps, their first words. I had nurtured them, protected them, and watched them grow into the adults they were today. But now it was just me, alone. My name is Nguyen Thai Lan, and I am a mother of 10. Or at least I was. 10 children, each one of them a part of me, a reflection of the love and sacrifices I poured into them. But now, as I stood here, looking out into the bleak winter landscape, I couldn't help but feel that I had been abandoned. Left behind by the very people I had dedicated my life to. The cold had begun to settle into my bones, and I could feel the ache of age creeping in. My joints hurt more than usual these days, and my hands, once steady and strong, trembled as I reached for the old kettle on the stove. I had long since given up on any dreams of comfort in my old age. The house, which had once been filled with the sounds of children's laughter, now echoed with nothing but silence. It had been weeks since I had last heard from any of my children, weeks since any of them had called or visited. I had tried to reach out to them, of course. I called them, sent letters, and even messaged them through social media. But each time I was met with silence. My calls went unanswered, my messages unread. The children I had raised, the children I had given everything for, had drifted away, too busy with their own lives to spare a thought for their aging mother. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that one of them would come for the holidays to visit and spend some time with me. But the Christmas season had come and gone, and still no one had shown up. My heart ached with every passing day as I sat in the empty living room, waiting for someone to knock on the door, to remind me that I wasn't completely forgotten. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that I was no longer a priority in their lives. I was just a memory, a faint echo of a time long past. And as much as I hated to admit it, I knew I had become a burden to them, a weight they no longer cared to carry. One afternoon, as I sat in the dim light of the living room, trying to read a book to pass the time, my phone rang. The ringtone was familiar, one of my sons calling. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. But when I answered, my son's voice was cold, distant, as if he were speaking to a stranger. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be able to make it for Christmas this year. Work's been crazy, and I just don't have the time." The words stung, sharper than I had expected. I had known he wouldn't come, but hearing it from his own lips was a blow I hadn't prepared for. I tried to hide the hurt in my voice as I replied, "It's okay, son, I understand." But it was okay. Nothing was okay. He went on, explaining how busy he was with his family and work, and how he couldn't afford to take time off. It felt like a rehearsed speech, one he had probably said to his wife or to his friends before. But what hurt the most was that he didn't even ask how I was doing. He didn't inquire about my health, about the aches in my body or the loneliness in my heart. He just didn't care. As the conversation came to an end, I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The silence that followed was deafening. My mind raced with thoughts of my other children, each one of them out there in the world, living their lives, moving on without me. I had given them everything. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own happiness, just to make sure they had everything they needed, and yet none of them seemed to care. I knew they had their own lives now, their own families and careers to worry about. I wasn't blind to that fact, but the emptiness that lingered in my heart was unbearable. I had devoted my entire life to them, and now I was just a forgotten relic of the past, discarded when I was no longer useful. I spent the next few days in a daze, walking through the house like a ghost. I couldn't bring myself to leave, to venture out into the cold world that had abandoned me. I didn't have the strength for it anymore. I had spent so many years pouring my energy into my children, into making sure they had everything they needed, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. And now, there was no one left to care for me. It was on the 5th day after my son's call that I received another message. this time from my daughter, Hoa. I held my breath as I opened it, hoping that this time things would be different. But when I read the message, I felt my stomach twist with anxiety. Mom, we need to talk. The family has discussed things and we've decided it's time for you to move out. We can't keep helping you anymore. You've become a burden to us and we just can't afford it. The words were like a slap to my face. A burden? I had always thought I was a mother, someone who gave, who nurtured. But now I was nothing more than a burden and inconvenience. I sat there frozen, unable to move or speak. How had it come to this? How had I gone from being a loving mother to a person they could discard so easily? The message continued with more details about how they had decided it was best for me to find somewhere else to live. They couldn't keep sending money or taking care of me anymore. They had their own lives to live, their own responsibilities. And as for the house, it was no longer my place. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read those final lines. The house that I had built with my own hands, the home where I had raised 10 children, was no longer mine. And I too was no longer a part of their lives. I wanted to scream, to call them out on their cruelty, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I was just a woman left to wither away in the empty shell of a house that had once been filled with love and laughter. But that day, as I sat there in the cold, I made a decision. I would not go down without a fight. If my children didn't want me, then I would find a way to survive on my own. I wasn't ready to give up yet. I had spent the better part of the morning pacing around the small living room, the bitter words from Hoa's message still echoing in my mind. The cold from outside seemed to creep into my bones, but it wasn't the chill of the weather that troubled me. It was the crushing weight of being abandoned by my own flesh and blood. I had always prided myself on being a good mother. I had given up my own dreams for them, poured every ounce of love I had into raising them. I had wiped their tears, cheered for their achievements, and supported them through every challenge. But none of that seemed to matter now. None of them seemed to care anymore. The days that followed were a blur of numbness. I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. The thought of packing my things and finding somewhere else to go seemed too overwhelming. I wasn't sure where I would go, or if anyone would even care to take me in. All I had now were the memories of the children I had raised, the life we had shared, and the house that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. But as the days passed, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I had no money, no family to turn to, and no idea how I was going to survive. The few friends I had left had all moved away, and even if they hadn't, I wasn't sure they would want to take in a burden like me. I sat in the dim light of the living room, staring at the empty walls. The house, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. It was hard to even remember the last time I had felt truly happy. My children had once promised to take care of me in my old age, but now I realized that those promises had been empty words. I reached for the phone, the familiar weight of it in my hand almost comforting. I had tried calling Hoa once more, but she didn't answer. I left a message, hoping she might change her mind, but I knew deep down that nothing would change. My children had made their decision, and I was no longer welcome in their lives. The thought of leaving the house, of stepping out into the unknown, terrified me. I wasn't sure I was strong enough to face the world alone. I had lived my life for my children, and now that they were gone, I felt as though I had nothing left. The hours stretched into days, and I found myself growing more and more withdrawn. I hardly ate, I hardly slept. I spent most of my time sitting by the window, watching the world go by, wishing for a time when things had been different, when I had been needed, when I had been loved. It wasn't until a week later, when I received a call from my youngest daughter, Mai, that things began to change. I had almost forgotten that she still existed. Mai had always been the quiet one, the one who kept to herself. She had been busy with her own life, her own family, and I hadn't heard from her in months. But this time when she called, her voice was filled with concern. "Mom, I just got your message," she said, her voice sounding distant but sincere. "Why didn't you tell me things had gotten this bad?" I sat up straighter, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "Mai, I didn't want to burden you. You have your own life to live, but I don't know where else to go. I can't stay here anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought she might hang up just like the others had, but then she spoke again. "I'm coming over tomorrow," she said. "We'll figure something out." I hung up the phone, feeling a glimmer of relief. Mai was coming. Maybe there was still hope after all. The next day I stood by the door waiting for her to arrive. My hands shook with anticipation, a mixture of hope and fear. I didn't know what she would say when she saw the condition I was in, or what her reaction would be to the fact that I had been abandoned by my other children. But I couldn't afford to think about that now. I had to focus on the one thing that seemed to matter. Mai was coming to help me. When she arrived, she was quiet at first, just like she always had been. She took one look at me and I saw the pain in her eyes. She didn't say anything right away, but I could tell that she had been holding back tears. After a long moment, she spoke. "I can't believe they did this to you, Mom," she said softly. "You gave up everything for us. You raised us, loved us, and this is how we repay you." I shook my head, feeling a lump form in my throat. "It doesn't matter now, Mai. What's done is done. I don't know what to do anymore." For a long time, we just stood there in silence, neither of us knowing what to say next. Mai looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the worn furniture and the faded photographs on the walls. Finally, she spoke again. "Mom, I've been thinking, you can't stay here alone anymore. It's not safe. And I know you've been too proud to ask for help, but I think it's time to accept that we all need each other." I looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "What are you saying, Mai?" She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I know I haven't been there for you like I should have, but I'm here now. I want to help you. I don't know what's going to happen with the others, but I'll do whatever I can to make sure you're okay." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at my daughter. She had always been the quiet one, the one who kept her distance. But here she was, offering me a lifeline when I had almost given up hope. "I'm sorry, Mom," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have come sooner. I should have been here for you." I reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch for the first time in a long while. "It's not your fault, Mai. You've always been there for me in your own way, but I was too proud to see it." We stood there for a moment, holding each other, letting the weight of the last few days settle between us. I didn't know what the future held or how things would change, but in that moment I felt a sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone. As we sat down to talk about what needed to be done, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Mai had come through for me when I least expected it. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for me after all. But as I looked at her, I realized that my journey was far from over. There were still many battles to fight, many tears to shed, and many decisions to be made. But one thing was certain. I wouldn't give up. I had fought for my children all my life, and now it was time for me to fight for myself. And with Mai by my side, I knew I could find the strength to keep going. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of fear, relief, and confusion. Mai had arrived at the house with a sense of urgency, determined to make sure I was safe. Her presence, though comforting, only served to highlight the deep rift between me and my other children. I had spent the last few days replaying the events in my mind, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. I sat at the small kitchen table, the sun's warmth filtering through the old, cracked window panes, casting soft rays on the cluttered table. The smell of tea, brewed by Mai, filled the air as she sat across from me, quietly watching me. There was a part of me that wanted to ask her everything, the things I had buried deep inside my heart for years, the questions that had never been answered. But I was afraid. Afraid of what I might hear, afraid of what I might learn about my children, about myself. Mai, sensing the weight of my silence, was the first to speak. "Mom," she said softly, her voice low and steady, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how things were when we were kids, and I know that I haven't been there for you the way I should have. I'm sorry." I looked at her, unable to find the words. What could I say? What was there to say after everything that had happened? She had done what she could, I knew that. But there was still so much hurt, so much betrayal, that it was hard to feel the full extent of her love. I just nodded. "You've always been the strong one, Mom," Mai continued, her eyes searching mine for something, perhaps forgiveness or understanding. "You gave everything for us. But you never asked for anything in return. You never let us see how much it hurt you when we didn't come around." Her words cut through me like a sharp knife, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. "I never wanted to burden you, Mai. You were busy with your life. I always thought you'd come back when you were ready. That maybe, just maybe, we'd all be together again." Mai looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of the tablecloth. I know, Mom, I know you thought that, but none of us really came back, did we? The question hung in the air between us, a silent accusation, but it wasn't her fault. It wasn't any of my children's fault, at least not entirely. It was just life, I supposed. Time had a way of separating people, of making them forget the things that mattered most. For a long time, there was only the sound of the kettle's gentle bubbling, as we both sat in silence. I thought about the days when my children were young, when their laughter filled the house, when their needs were the center of my universe. I had forgotten what it felt like to be needed, truly needed, and not just as a caretaker or a provider. But now, sitting here with Mai, I wondered if I had ever been seen for who I truly was, just a woman, a mother who had given everything for her family. I want to help you, Mom, Mai said, breaking my thoughts. I can't change the past, but I can try to make things better from now on. I don't know how, but we can figure it out. You don't have to be alone anymore. I looked up at her, her face soft with sincerity, and for the first time in a long while I felt something close to hope. It wasn't the same hope I had once felt when I believed my children would always be by my side, but it was something. Something that made me believe I could survive this, no matter how painful it was. I don't want to be a burden, I whispered, the words coming out in a rush. I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of me. Mai reached out and placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and reassuring. You're not a burden, Mom, you're my mother, and that's enough. It will always be enough. For a moment, I felt the flood of emotions that I had been holding back for so long. The tears that had never quite fallen, the pain I had never truly acknowledged, all of it came rushing to the surface. I let the tears fall, not because I was weak, but because I was finally allowing myself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. I've always tried to be strong, I said between sobs, my voice barely audible. I thought if I was strong enough, you'd all come back. I thought if I kept giving, kept doing everything for you, you'd see that I needed you too. But I was wrong. Mai squeezed my hand tighter, her voice steady but filled with emotion. You weren't wrong, Mom. You gave everything you had, and that's something none of us can ever forget. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'll make sure you're never alone again. Her words were like a balm to my soul. They didn't erase the pain or the years of loneliness, but they gave me something to hold on to, a glimmer of light in the darkness. The following days were a blur of small tasks and quiet conversations. Mai helped me pack up my belongings, carefully sorting through the things I had kept over the years. Some of it was easy to part with, but other items, old photographs, worn-out clothes, held too many memories. As we worked together, I realized that while the past had shaped me, it was the present that mattered now. We talked about everything, the family, the past, the future. Mai shared her life with me, telling me about her children, her husband, her struggles and triumphs. And though I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy when she spoke about her own family, I knew deep down that I was happy for her. She had built a life of her own, something I could never take away from her. But there were still unanswered questions, and I knew they wouldn't go away until I faced them. Mai, I said one afternoon as we were sitting together on the couch sipping tea, what happened to the others? Why did they leave me? Why did they stop caring? Mai's face grew serious, and for the first time I saw the weight of her own feelings. I don't know, Mom, she said, her voice heavy with regret. I don't know what happened to them. They were always so busy, so focused on their own lives, but they should have been here for you, I know that, and I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner. I nodded, not expecting any answers, not really. Some questions didn't have answers, and some things were just too painful to revisit. I had done my best, and I had to accept that. I couldn't change the past, no matter how much I wanted to. The rest of the week passed slowly, with Mai continuing to help me settle into my new life. It wasn't easy, and I often found myself overwhelmed by the changes. But with every passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more hopeful. As I stood in the small apartment that Mai had arranged for me, I looked out the window at the city below. It was a new beginning, a new chapter in my life. And though it was not the life I had imagined, it was mine to live. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of peace. The apartment that Mai had arranged for me was small but cozy. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There was a quiet comfort in its simplicity. I had never thought I would end up living alone in a small place like this. The thought of being independent at my age felt both daunting and empowering. Yet as I stood there, looking at the sparse furniture and bare walls, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of freedom. I was free from the ties that had held me down for so many years. And yet that freedom was bittersweet. I had always dreamed of living a peaceful, comfortable life in my old age, surrounded by family. But now, that dream felt like a distant memory, one I could never fully reach. The reality of the situation settled over me like a heavy cloak, reminding me that the years I had spent raising my children, giving everything to them, had been in vain. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. The apartment was quiet, and the silence seemed to press in on me. I had no one to talk to, no one to share my thoughts with. It was just me now. I unpacked slowly, trying to make the space feel more like home. I found a few of my favorite books and placed them on the small shelf by the window. I carefully arranged the few family photos I had left on the table, hoping they would bring some warmth to the cold, sterile space. But no matter how much I tried to personalize it, it still felt unfamiliar, like I was living in someone else's home. The days that followed were filled with a mix of tasks, cleaning, organizing, and settling into my new routine. I had no real plans for the future. I didn't know what the next step would be. All I knew was that I had to keep moving forward, no matter how uncertain or painful the journey was. There were moments when the loneliness hit me hardest. I would be sitting in the small living room, staring at the walls, and suddenly I would be overwhelmed by the emptiness of it all. I missed my children. I missed the noise, the chaos, the love that had once filled my life. But now all I had was this quiet, this silence, and the memories that threatened to suffocate me. It was during one of these moments that Mai came over. She had been coming by regularly, helping me with the small things, grocery shopping, setting up utilities, checking in to make sure I was doing okay. I was grateful for her presence, but there was a part of me that felt guilty for relying on her so much. She had her own family, her own life to live. I didn't want to be a burden to her, but I couldn't deny how much I needed her. "Mom, how are you doing today?" Mai asked as she walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. I didn't want her to worry, but the truth was I was far from fine, just getting used to things. She gave me a skeptical look, her brow furrowing in concern. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know. I can see through it." I sighed and sat down on the couch. "I don't know, Mai. I feel like I'm just existing here. I don't know what my purpose is anymore. I spent so many years focused on raising you all, and now I don't know who I am." Mai sat down beside me, her hand resting on mine. "I know it's hard, Mom. I can't imagine how you must be feeling, but you've been so strong your whole life. This is just another challenge, another chapter. You'll find your way, you always do." Her words were comforting, but they didn't completely erase the doubt that lingered in my mind. I had spent so many years defined by my role as a mother. But now that my children had moved on, now that they had abandoned me, I felt lost. I wasn't sure who I was without them. "I'm just so tired, Mai," I said, my voice breaking. "Tired of trying to please everyone, tired of giving and giving only to be left with nothing. I don't even know who I am anymore." Mai squeezed my hand tighter, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You are my mother. You are the woman who raised 10 children, who sacrificed everything for us. You've always been enough, Mom. You don't have to do anything more. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, not to us and certainly not to them." I looked at her, searching her face for some sign that she truly understood. She had always been the quiet one, the one who kept her distance, but here she was, sitting beside me, offering me the love and support I had so desperately needed. "You've been through so much and you've come out the other side stronger. I know you're hurt, and I know it's going to take time to heal, but you're not alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her words, though simple, were like a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of a storm. I didn't know how long it would take to heal from the betrayal, from the abandonment, but at least I had her. I had one child who cared, one child who wasn't afraid to step up and support me when I needed it the most. "I don't know how to thank you, Mai," I whispered, feeling a lump in my throat. "You don't have to thank me," she replied, her voice soft. "You've always been there for us, now it's our turn." I felt a flicker of something deep inside me, a spark of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness. It was small, but it was there. Over the next few weeks, I began to settle into my new life. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its challenges, but with Mai's help, I slowly started to rebuild. I began to go out more, to take walks around the neighborhood, to meet people. I even started volunteering at the local community center, helping with food drives and activities for the elderly. It wasn't much, but it gave me a sense of purpose. It made me feel like I was contributing again, like I mattered. But even as I worked to rebuild my life, there were moments when the past came rushing back. The memories of my children, the memories of the family I had lost, would suddenly flood my mind, and I would find myself choking back tears. The pain of being abandoned was still raw, still fresh, and sometimes it felt unbearable. But with each passing day, I learned to carry that pain, to live with it, and to find ways to heal. Mai continued to visit regularly, and though she was busy with her own life, she always made time for me. We would sit together, talking about the past, about the future, and sometimes just sharing a quiet moment of companionship. Her presence, her unwavering support, made all the difference. One afternoon, after returning from my shift at the community center, I found a letter on my doorstep. It was from one of my other children, my son Khan. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. The letter was short, but the words were clear. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything. I know I've let you down. I'm sorry for the way things turned out. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope we can talk soon. I miss you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read the letter. It wasn't a perfect apology, and it wasn't the full explanation I had been waiting for, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of a reconciliation or just another empty gesture, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the woman I had been when I first received the message from Mai. I had been broken, shattered by the cruelty of my children's abandonment, but now I was starting to heal. I was starting to rebuild my life, one small step at a time. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel quite so alone. The days had started to feel like a blur. My routine had become predictable. Wake up, make tea, go for a walk around the neighborhood, and then spend my afternoons volunteering at the community center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. I had started to believe that this new life, though not the one I had envisioned for my golden years, could still have meaning. I was finding purpose in the smallest of things, in helping others, in making new connections. But just when I thought I had finally started to piece together the fragments of my life, something unexpected happened. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the world outside seemed still, as if the earth itself were taking a breath. I had just finished my breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal, and was sitting by the window when the phone rang. The sound sliced through the stillness, and I instinctively reached for it. The name that appeared on the screen was familiar: Khan, my son. The one who had cut me off for so long, the one who had left me behind like an old, forgotten relic. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since that cold message he sent telling me that I had become a burden. My heart began to race as I stared at his name. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. But then I reminded myself of what Mai had told me. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to close yourself off. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Hello," my voice sounded uncertain, shaky even. "Mom," Khan's voice came through the line, rough around the edges, as though he were struggling with his words. I need to talk to you." The sound of his voice, so different from the cold, distant tone of his past calls, made my heart skip a beat. It was almost as if he was asking for something. But what? "Khan, is everything okay?" I asked, the worry evident in my tone. I'm sorry, Mom," he said, the words hanging in the air like a heavy weight. "I don't even know where to begin. I've been so caught up in my life, in my own problems, that I forgot what really mattered. I forgot you." I sat back, stunned by his words. Sorry. He had never apologized before, not for the way he treated me, not for the way he abandoned me without a second thought. The emotions I had kept buried for so long began to surface. Anger, confusion, hurt. But I pushed them aside. This was my son, and for the first time in a long while, he was reaching out to me. "I don't know what to say," I replied honestly, my voice trembling with the weight of everything that had happened. "You've hurt me, Khan. You and your siblings, I gave everything for you all, and now it feels like you've all just moved on, left me behind." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I wondered if he had hung up. But then he spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost regretful. "I know, Mom," he said. "I know, and I'm sorry. I've been selfish. I've let work, my family, and everything else come between us. And I've ignored how much I hurt you. But I want to change that. I want to be there for you again. I just don't know how to make it right." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive him. He had broken my heart once, and I wasn't sure I could bear the thought of letting him back in just to be hurt again. But then something inside me shifted. Maybe, just maybe, I owed it to myself to give him a chance. To see if he was truly trying to make amends, or if this was just another empty apology. "I don't know, Khan," I said, my voice faltering. "It's not easy to just forget what happened. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to listen." "Thank you, Mom," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do whatever it takes to earn it. I don't want to lose you again." The sincerity in his words broke something deep inside me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had spent so many years waiting for my children to come back to me, for them to realize the sacrifices I had made. And now, one of them was finally reaching out. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I wasn't too broken to mend the ties that had been severed. "I want to see you, Khan," I said, my heart beating faster now. "I don't know when, but I want to see you in person. I want to talk." "I'll come to you," he replied immediately. "I'll be there as soon as I can. I just need to make things right." I hung up the phone feeling a mix of emotions. My son was coming to visit. After everything that had happened, he was finally coming to see me. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than despair. I felt like maybe there was still a chance for us, for me to heal, for me to find peace. That afternoon, I sat in the small living room of my apartment, waiting. The time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every little sound, every car that passed by made my heart race. Was he on his way? Was he really going to come? I tried to stay calm, but my mind kept spinning with questions and doubts. Hours later, the doorbell rang and I froze. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but also dreading. I stood up slowly, walking to the door with shaking hands. When I opened it, there he was, Khan, standing in the doorway, looking older, more tired, but still very much my son. For a moment we just stood there, neither of us knowing what to say. And then, without a word, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. I stiffened at first, not sure how to react. It had been so long since he had shown me any affection. But then, I let myself relax into his embrace. It felt strange, but also comforting. It was as if we were both trying to make up for all the lost time, all the years we had spent apart. "I've missed you, Mom," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. There were no words that could take away the pain, no words that could fix what had been broken. But I didn't need words. In that moment, his presence was enough. We sat down together, and for the first time in years, I felt like a mother again, like I wasn't completely invisible. We talked not about the past or the mistakes, but about the present, about the things that mattered now. And slowly, over the course of the evening, I began to believe that this could be the beginning of something new, something healing. The road ahead would not be easy, I knew that. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't walking it alone. Khan was back, and with him, perhaps a piece of the family I had lost. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us all. The evening that Khan arrived at my apartment marked the beginning of something I hadn't dared to hope for in years, a genuine reconnection. The pain I had carried for so long began to ebb, replaced by a cautious optimism that I hadn't felt since the days when my children were young. We spent the evening talking, slowly unearthing years of silence. Khan apologized repeatedly for his absence, for the cold distance he had put between us, but I didn't want to dwell too much on the past. There was something about the way he spoke now, his voice no longer carrying the hardened edges of anger or resentment, but a raw honesty that made me believe he was truly trying. Trying to heal the wounds he had helped create, trying to repair the relationship we had once shared. but there was still a nagging voice in my head, one that whispered doubts. Was this just a temporary attempt to make things right, or was it something real? Was this the start of something lasting, or was it another false hope destined to be shattered? I decided, for the sake of my peace of mind, that I would stop overthinking. I would let the moment be what it was, an opportunity to rebuild, even if only a little at a time. As Khan sat across from me, his tired eyes still filled with regret, I realized that this wasn't just about him. This was about me too. I had spent so many years focusing on others, on what they needed, on what they expected of me. I had given everything, hoping for the same in return. But now I understood that healing wouldn't come from my children alone. It had to come from within me. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in years. I was finally able to release the resentment I had carried so long. It wasn't a perfect process, and there would be setbacks along the way. But for the first time in ages, I felt like I was taking the first steps toward healing, toward finding peace. "It's good to have you back, Khan," I said, my voice soft but steady. "I've missed you." He nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. "I've missed you too, Mom. I'm sorry I took so long to come back. I didn't realize how much I hurt you until now." I smiled gently, my heart full but still cautious. "I know, but we can't change what's already happened. We can only move forward from here." We spent the next few hours talking about everything, the past, the present, and what the future might hold. There was no rush to make everything right in a single evening. We simply sat together, sharing memories, telling stories, and getting to know each other again. It felt strange, but comforting at the same time. The world outside had continued on, indifferent to my pain, but in this small apartment, something had shifted. I was no longer invisible. I wasn't just the forgotten mother or the discarded relic of the past. I was a person, a woman, a mother still capable of being loved. Khan didn't leave that night. He stayed for a few days, helping me around the apartment, spending time with me. He even took me out for lunch one day, something I hadn't done in ages. We talked, laughed, and shared simple moments. It wasn't the grand reconciliation I had once dreamed of, but it was enough. It was more than I had hoped for, and it was a step toward rebuilding the relationship I had once lost. Still, there were moments when the hurt resurfaced. There were moments when I would catch myself thinking of the other children, the ones who hadn't reached out, the ones who hadn't cared enough to even check on me. The emptiness that came from their absence was hard to ignore, even with Khan sitting beside me. But I knew that this journey wasn't just about fixing what had been broken with one child. It was about finding my own way forward, with or without them. "I'm sorry, Mom," Khan said one evening as we sat on the couch, watching an old family video. "I didn't understand what you went through, raising all of us on your own. I was selfish. I didn't see how much you were giving up for us." I looked at him, my heart swelling with a mix of love and sorrow. "You didn't know, Khan. You were a child, but now you're an adult and you have your own life. I know you've got your own struggles too, and I don't want to burden you." He shook his head, his expression firm. "You're not a burden, Mom. I've realized that now. I've spent so many years running from what matters, from what's important. I took you for granted. I took everything for granted." We sat in silence for a while, both lost in our thoughts. I could see the weight of regret in his eyes, and I couldn't help but feel that perhaps this was the moment he truly understood. The moment he realized how much I had sacrificed, how much I had given without asking for anything in return. Maybe it had taken him years to come to this realization, but the important thing was that he had. As the days passed, Khan and I grew closer. He didn't have all the answers, and neither did I, but we were learning how to communicate, how to be there for each other in a way we hadn't before. He made time for me, not just out of obligation, but because he wanted to. And slowly, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter for us. I couldn't deny that the pain of the past still lingered. The other children hadn't reached out, and I wasn't sure they ever would. But as I sat there with Khan, I realized that I didn't need their validation. I had already spent so much of my life giving to them, sacrificing my own happiness and dreams for their well-being. And while I would always love them, I needed to take care of myself too. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but as I looked at my son sitting next to me, I realized that this was my journey. This was my time to heal, to rediscover who I was outside of my role as a mother, as a caretaker. And I couldn't do that if I kept clinging to the past, to the hurt, to the expectations I had placed on myself for so long. I started to make small changes in my life. I joined a book club at the community center, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I started taking yoga classes, doing things for my own well-being. It felt selfish in a way, but it was the first time in years that I felt like I was living for myself, not for anyone else. And that was okay. Khan continued to visit, and as he did, I could see the change in him. The regret was still there, but so was the determination to make things right. He spent more time with his own children, more time with me, and even began to reach out to his siblings. It wasn't easy, and the path to reconciliation was still long, but I had hope. I had learned that healing didn't happen overnight. It was a journey, one that took time and patience. And though there were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me under, I knew I was no longer alone. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Khan said one evening as we sat together, watching the sunset through the window. "I don't know how you did it, but you've always been strong. And you've taught me what it means to truly care, to truly love." I smiled softly, feeling a warmth in my chest that had been absent for so long. "You've always had that strength, Khan. You just needed to find it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a warm, golden light, I realized something important. The past, with all its pain and regret, no longer defined me. I was more than the mother who had been abandoned. I was more than the woman who had given everything and received nothing in return. I was still here, still standing, still capable of love and connection. And as I looked at my son, I knew that this was only the beginning. The healing, the rebuilding, the second chances, it was all still ahead of me.